it's Tavanga, also known as Taethetraveler. I hope you guys are well, I hope you guys are having an amazing week and you guys are enjoying the videos. I was actually watching back some of my videos and I realized I always look the wrong way. I always look this way so I can see my screen, so I can see myself when I'm speaking, but I actually need to look this way when my camera is facing, so it looks like I'm looking at you. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. Please be graceful with me as I'm getting used to this whole YouTube thing and filming and knowing where to look and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, let's get into the video. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about my testimony, about the necessity and the power of sharing our testimony and embracing our testimony as our own. So I'll kind of just share my story. So I've been born into the church. You know, I always joke about my friends and say that I was born at the altar because it kind of feels like that. My family have always been in some kind of ministry, some sort of ministry. So from very early on, I was always plugged into the church. And so I was, you know, going to every prayer meeting. I was always at a youth group. I was always at some cell group. I was very much plugged into the church and ministry, and I had a relationship with God from a very, very young age. I gave my life to God when I was really, really young. I have memories of myself around like 5, 6, 7, and my mum used to wake up and pray with a group of women from our church, and I used to cry because I'd be like, Mum, wake me up, like I also want to pray. And my mum would feel so bad having to wake up this little 6-year-old to pray at 4 a.m, but she didn't wake me up. I'll be so upset in the morning because I really wanted to get up and pray as well. Like I just loved God so much and I really loved his presence. I used to fast at a really young age. I remember being in primary school, you know, they'd bring like milk and fruit around like 11 just before lunch as a snack, and I'd always be like, oh no thank you, because I was fasting. And I had a kid's Bible and I used to read it and just like highlight it, and I just really hungered after God. I just really loved the Lord and I loved the presence and I loved worship. And so that was always my story, and from that I grew up. I was really plugged into our youth. I became a youth leader, and even when I went to uni I ended up becoming president of our Christian society for like 2 years. And so my story with God has always been a story of just kind of growing in love with him and just knowing him. I never rebelled. I never went through that, I guess, that rebellion stage of running away from God and coming back. I just have loved and served God for as long as I can remember, for my whole life. So in my first year of uni, I met this girl called Bucky, and we were in our Christian society. And so she said to me, oh, tell me your story, tell me your testimony. And I looked at her and I was just like, oh, I don't have a testimony. And she was like, no, but everybody has a testimony. And I was like, no, honestly, I don't. Like, I've just loved God my entire life. I've always been a Christian. And before I could finish what I was saying, she stopped me and she was like, Tavanga, that is your testimony. That is your testimony. And what I realized is that the word testimony means to give witness to attest to something. And so when we give our testimonies, what we are doing is we are giving witness to what God has done. We're giving witness to what Jesus has done. So by me saying I don't have a testimony, what I was saying is God has not done anything in my life. Jesus has not done anything in my life, which is completely and utterly true. What God had done is that God had preserved and protected me from a very tender age and not allowed me to taste and not allowed me to rebel. Obviously, I've tasted sin, I've sinned, but as in I hadn't gone into rebellion and I hadn't tried to run away from God, and I hadn't backslidden, because I'd always just hungered for his love, hungered for his presence, and he had just protected me. When I was in high school, I went to a Christian private school, and not like, you know, those Church of England schools where they say they're Christian. No, I mean, we used to have praise and worship every morning in assembly. We were singing Hillsong songs. At one point, I remember, I think I was like in year 9, we used to have like a prayer meeting at lunchtime that was free. Like any of the students could go. All our teachers were Christians, and I mean born again, like Christians, Holy Spirit filled Christians. And so that was my story. And so I was always insecure about my testimony, because growing up, when I would hear people's testimonies, when I'd hear people's stories, there were always these amazing, crazy, dramatic, big stories of how God had rescued them from, you know, prostitution or from drugs, or how they would loved God from a young age, but then when they got older, you know, they left God and started sleeping with guys and going clubbing, and then they came back, and that wasn't my story. So I was so insecure because I just thought like that my story isn't powerful enough to change anybody. My story isn't powerful enough for anybody to hear it and want to come to Christ. So I never used to share my testimony, and I was just very insecure about that. But then I started realizing that, you know what? the beauty about our testimony is that it's meant to give glory to God. It is meant to show off. It's meant to showcase God's nature and what God has done and God's power and his ability. And what God has done in my life is astounding. The fact that at 22, I'm almost 23, I have loved God for 22 years. I have served God for 22 years. I have been in love with this amazing creator, and I've not run away from that. That is amazing. That shows the power of God. That shows the power of the presence of God and his love, that once you taste that, it is so hard. It is so hard to run away from it. I remember when I was like 16, I was like, yeah, when I'm 18, I'm going to move out and I'm going to go clubbing and I'm going to do whatever. Guys, when I was 18, I was serving God on the mission field. I was in India. I was sharing the gospel. And that's because I could not come to myself. I could not get myself to unplug myself from God, from Jesus, because I tasted his love. I tasted his presence. And so I just really want to encourage somebody out there whose story might not be crazy and big and dramatic. I want to tell you that there is power in your testimony. There's necessity in sharing your story. There is somebody that needs to hear that, because not everybody who needs to hear the gospel has a crazy story. Not everybody who needs to hear the gospel is going to relate to somebody who did drugs, is going to relate to somebody who's sleeping around, is going to relate to people that did drugs. There is somebody out there. God has given you your testimony to witness to a certain group of people. There are people who need to hear your story, that are going to be moved by your story, who are going to want to come to know this God. They're going to look at you and be like, wait, you're telling me that you've never done all these things because you've decided to choose God over it. And you're like, yeah. And they're going to be like, what? I want to know this God. I want to know this God that has stopped you from wanting to pursue what society says is the norm. That's the power in your story. That's the power in your testimony. So I don't want you guys to be discouraged in your story. And if your story is this crazy, amazing story, God has plucked you from drugs, again, don't be ashamed of sharing that. That demonstrates the power of the gospel. Guys, our testimonies are not for us. Our testimonies are not to glorify us. They're not to say anything about us. They're completely to give a witness and testimony to the power of the cross, to the power of the gospel. And, so I just want to encourage you guys for that. And with that, I want to encourage you guys to go share your story with people, to be bold, to embrace your stories as your own, to give complete glory to God as you're sharing them. And yeah, today's a really short video, but yeah, I just hope you guys get something from it. Let me know your testimony, guys, in the comment section. Share with me what God has done in your life. Share with me if your story is similar to mine. Have you always been in the church and kind of grown to love God with age? Or, did you come to know God when you were older? And did God save you from something crazy, from death, from drugs, from all these things? I want to hear your heart. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your testimony. And I'm sure it'll bless a lot of people in the comment section. So yeah, please comment. And also don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe, and hopefully these videos are blessing you. They're making an impact in your walk with God. Bye guys.